Look! Up in the sky! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's a new political party dedicated to fighting corporate greed and corruption! It's the Justice Democrats!
Hello everyone, and welcome to Balance Point Radio. This is Nathan.
And Matt.
Today I have some news actually. A new political party has started in the Democratic Party. It was initially started by Cenk Uygur and Kyle Secular Talk. I don't think anyone can pronounce his name correctly. But a lot of Bernie Sanders campaign advisors, a lot of his top advisors are also backing this initiative, and I think Bernie Sanders has endorsed it as well. It's called the Justice Democrats. Now, I am incredibly excited for this. I think it's exactly what we need to fight Trump. We need strong Democrats back in Congress, not the corporate Democrats that I basically dismantled in my government corruption episode. So, just give you a rundown of what it is. What's going to be happening is they're getting nominations for different politicians that they're going to use to primary corporate Democrats. So anyone who doesn't agree with the platform, any Democrat who does not agree with the platform that we're about to discuss, will be primary. And one of the pledges you make of course, you pledge to the platform, but you also pledge to take absolutely no big donor money. It is all grassroots donations from the people. Now, they have, I think, over 900 nominees so far. And, of course, they have to go through a vetting process and see who will actually win. Like, if I nominated myself, of course, I probably might not get in because I don't have any official political experience, like running as like a mayor or something like that. But yeah, like you can nominate somebody. You can, like, if you have a representative in your state or in your city legislature or your state legislature that you think would be great and would pledge to this platform and pledge to not take any donor money, you can do so. We are talking about the platform right now from the Justice Democrats website. You can donate there. You can sign up, say, if you want to be a part of this. So it's basically a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. And like I said, it's something that it needs very badly. So here we go. The platform. It's time to face the facts. The Democratic Party is broken and the corporate establishment wing of the party is responsible. Republicans now hold most state legislatures, most governorships, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the presidency. So in 2018, hundreds of Justice Democrats will run a unified campaign to replace every corporate-backed member of Congress and rebuild the party from scratch. And it says, this is our plan, and we will be discussing this plan.
Yeah, just ignore the sound of me fist pumping over here as you read about how Republicans hold, like, pretty much everything right now.
It's not progressives' fault. It's the establishment Democrats' fault from taking the money.
I mean, whoever's fault it is, I'm very happy that it happened.
Well, before we start, I just want to make a quick point. Them taking the corporate money it handicaps them from the beginning. Like, well, we have to take some of the money or we can't run. Well, you only take like 30% or 40% of the money. The Republicans get more money than you do. So in that scenario, you will always lose because they are playing you out of your own game. It would be different if you were getting more money than the Republicans.
Yeah, and just as a quick aside, in this past election cycle, I think it really proved, though, that, we're talking about a big election. You're talking about, like, your Senate elections, when you're looking for a seat in the House or the Senate or for a presidential election. It doesn't necessarily matter if you spend more money, because Clinton outspent Trump and she outspent Sanders, and she realistically should have lost both of those. She did lose one, should have lost to Sanders, who had less money. So, the idea of, well, you need a whole bunch of money, you need to take these big donations to run, isn't necessarily true. You need a little bit you do need some capital to pay people and to keep the machine running. But truth be told, you're going to get coverage, and it's about using that coverage wisely.
Well, if you think about it, there were statistics shown, if you count how much coverage, free media Trump got, he got about $2 billion in free media. There's a lot of sources that say that. I shouldn't have to look up that source, but...
Oh, no, he played the media like a fiddle. It was amazing watching it. It's like watching someone play 3D chess.
I think it's more of like the dying media than anything else. They trying to find anything to grab ratings instead of actually doing real reporting, what they should have been doing in the first place. But let's go ahead and get to it. So the first initiative, the first article on the platform, is passed a constitutional amendment to put an end to Washington corruption and bring about election reform. The super PAC should be banned, private donation to politicians and campaigns should be banned, and a clean public financing system should be implemented to end the takeover of our government by corporations and billionaires. Now, I assume this would also mean that unions would still be able to donate, because they do that through the members of their unions.
Well, I mean, for what they're outlining here, the banning of super PACs and private donations to politicians. I would say if you're going to ban super PACs, then you would have to rein in. You would have to rein in any type of special interest donation, especially unions, because unions have massive entities with a lot of money behind them. And they give a lot of money when it comes to politicians that back their platforms there.
Yeah, you could be right. It might also mean to ban super PACs from unions as well, but still that's a necessary casualty from getting all of this money out of the politics. So I went into this extensively in an earlier episode called "Is Our Government Bought?" I did some research and I looked up how much money a candidate got versus how they voted, and also how much money they got versus what their political leaning is. And just to paraphrase it, Cory Booker got about, I think it was like $400,000. I can't remember the exact amount. Around $400,000 from the healthcare companies. And a couple weeks ago, he downvoted, using Reddit terms, he voted nay. Again, he voted against a legislation that would allow us to import drugs from Canada, cheaper drugs from Canada, instead of paying double in America. So that is a direct nod to his donors, saying, okay, I'm going to protect your profits. The Republicans, there's ones, Donald Trump himself, I think it was what's your guy, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio. Also, they've all been avid climate change deniers. Very avid.
Yeah, but that's par for the course for the Republican
Yeah, of course.
Party.
But they received...
I mean, I don't think you can link that to any specific, donations that have come from any specific parties, because whether or not they get those donations, they're going counter to what the Democrats are saying, and the Democrats are pushing climate change as a way to attack oil companies.
Progressives and progressive Democrats agree with Republicans on trade policy, and that things should be built in America and not overseas, and our workers should be favored overseas. So if we can agree on that and not climate change, and the reason is because they've received hundreds of billions of dollars over the last 10 years from Koch brothers, ExxonMobil, Chevron Mobil, and that you can't say that hasn't influenced their vote, because that's hundreds of billions of dollars from a single industry, and there you see a response going against every single scientist out there, saying that climate change is a real thing and it's caused by humans.
I would say if you follow that money and you say, okay, they are getting these donations from these big oil companies, that might not necessarily make them unbiased. However, again, I'm going to fall back to my first point. Their direct opposition is saying, okay, climate change exists and we should be making these broad sweeping moves to counter it. Not too much of a leap to say, okay, well, they're going to take the opposite side of that issue. Every now and then you do have Republicans and Democrats, the party platforms do align on certain things, but more often than not, the stance that one side takes is going to be counter to the stance that the other side takes, just like the pro-life, pro-choice movement. One side takes one side, the other side takes the other side.
That's a good point, though. But the thing is, Hillary Clinton herself has received upwards, it was $700,000, I think the figure was, from oil companies. Now, what is her stance on fracking? Well, she is for fracking, and fracking pollutes our drinking water, and it gives us more access to fossil fuels that damage our planet. So that's not just Republicans that are doing it. Democrats are doing it too. it is systemic corruption on both sides of the aisle.
I mean, I'm not going to say that there aren't politicians that have been bought. I mean, I think that's
there should
kind
be
of like
no
one of the worst
politicians
kept.
bought.
That's
period.
what I'm saying. That's like the worst kept secret of American politics is that it's very easy, you know, to kind of grease the wheels with lobbyists to get things, you know, pushed through that are pertinent to your interests. I guess kind of what I'm getting to though is that the solution that they have here of, you know, banning super PACs and banning donations from, you know, citizens groups aren't necessarily the way to go. Now maybe saying, okay, you know, corporations can't make donations, and you know those donations have to come through, or you know we can only take large donations from, say nonprofit organizations or something like that. Okay, you know I could probably get on board with something like that, but I mean you still have the same special interests working. They're just going to be working through a different avenue there. I mean, I guess you're never going to get that big money out of politics.
That's a good point.
They're always going to find a way to get it in.
Here's the thing, though, with a great first step would be overturning Citizens United, and Citizens United, it basically considers corporations on the same level as people, and allows them to make political donations. A corporation, you and me can agree, I would think that corporations is not a human being.
Well,
it is not a person. It shouldn't be an entity with rights as a human.
Legally, a corporation is an entity with rights, and it's an entity with rights and responsibilities. That's why you can tax a corporation like you can tax a person. Because corporations, they're taxed income tax.
But here's the glaring problem, though. Corporations, their main focus, their main goal is to maximize profits. Doesn't matter how the will of the people view things. So if their only view is to maximize profits, then they will not care what the actual needs and wants of the American people. They will always focus on their profits, no matter if it damages the American people, no matter if it helps the American people. It doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's the job of a corporation. Like the point of a corporation, the point of the corporate leadership is to protect the profits and, you know, protect their stockholders. They're supposed to make decisions that are in the best interests of their stockholders, and stockholders want to see gain in their investments. The point of a corporation, the point of any business, isn't to run a charity; it's to make money. The point of everything I do is to make money. That just because I want to become wealthy doesn't mean I'm any less of a person. You know, and if we're gonna say, okay, well we want to overturn Citizens United, you know, and we don't want corporations to be viewed as people anymore, then we need to stop taxing corporations.
Okay, well you make a good point. The thing is, you have beliefs, and your political beliefs align with what you want in life. Isn't that correct?
Well, yeah.
So it would assume that corporations, one would assume that if corporations have this power to influence our politics, then it would help the people in the corporation as well. All of the people in the corporation. Because that corporation benefits from whatever law or whatever legislation they're trying to get passed based on the policies that they've bought.
Well, when a corporation does well, then the people that work for that corporation do well. You know, when stock price,
the median income versus productivity and executive bonuses and executive salary do not match that.
Right, but your executive leadership also has much higher responsibility than your guy in the mailroom.
I understand that, but there's been no increase in median household income.
Yeah, but that's not that's not the fault of that's not the job of a corporation. The job of a corporation, I mean, again, the point of a corporation is to maximize profits. I mean, if we're talking about median or mean income increase in the country, that's due to government regulation. You know, I mean, if you remove tax burden from citizens, then you're going to see more money move around in the economy, and we haven't seen that. We've seen increased tax burden on citizens. So what I would maintain is that the idea that the corporation is responsible for the well-being of the country, it just isn't true. I mean, it's an unrealistic expectation of to expect that of a corporation.
Well, if they can influence the politics and influence our political officials in a bigger way than a single vote from you or me could, by being able to buy ads, being able to fund campaign managers and campaign officials, like political campaign officials and ground troops that get out the vote, they can influence that to suit their needs. To suit the wants that they want, the legislation that they want passed.
Right. I mean, but that is something that any large enough entity can do. I mean, that's why we have PACs and super PACs, where, you have citizens and groups can come together, fundraise to meet that same level that a large corporation would be able to. And if I'm not mistaken, there is already a limit on how much any individual donation to a political campaign can be. Like it's not limitless ceiling.
Well, they have Hillary Clinton was famous for this. She had these paid speeches, and she would just go there and just talk to them and tell them what they wanted to hear, and she get paid $300,000 for it. If that isn't blatant bribery, I don't know what is.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, because I might actually gag on my words here, but if someone is willing to pay $300,000 to hear Hillary Clinton speak, we're not in any position to say that they can't pay that money. Now, I will say, however, because I can't say a statement that is defending Hillary Clinton ever exit my mouth, that if any politician, in this case, if Hillary Clinton is going to take $300,000 for a speaking fee, and then turn around and dump that into a campaign, then that money definitely needs to be accounted for, and, may need to walk it back and say,
She did these speeches just before her campaign started.
But then that gets into it. That's a slippery slope, though, because then you start saying, okay, well, how much money can an individual politician put into their campaign? And if we're saying, okay, well, an individual politician can only put so much money into their campaign, then they have to fundraise.
That's different. An individual politician could, in my mind, could invest as much of their own money as they want, because they're not being bought by someone else. They are financing their own beliefs.
Right, but if Hillary Clinton goes and she does a speaking engagement for Goldman Sachs, and they pay her $500,000 or $1 million for speaking engagement, and she puts that $1 million directly into her campaign, then she's technically self-funding it, even though the money is coming from an outside party.
Yes, but
I mean, and that's where it gets kind of sketchy, because then you're looking at, like, okay, well, how much are we saying any one person can put into a political campaign, and then if we're limiting that, then they have to fundraise, but then we're saying
there should be a cap. That in my mind, that should be illegal.
It's a lot of regulation.
You should not be able to have a public speaking fee. There should be a cap on public speaking fees.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's when you're talking about now you're over regulating everything. That's when you start getting crazy.
Public speaking fees for politicians, that not just for any American. If someone wants to hear Warren Buffett speak, they can pay as much as they want to Warren Buffett to hear him speak. But when it comes to someone who, if they have held political office, if they are running to hold political office, because I believe she did some of these speeches while she was running for president.
Oh, I would believe that she did.
So that should be illegal.
So then are we advocating to say that if you're running for political office, there's a cap on your income?
From people who are in businesses that want to pay you to speak.
That's a really nebulous definition, though.
Well, that's just one of the many kind of dark areas you can figure out. You shouldn't be able to be receive cars or receive gifts from corporations or from wealthy people.
Well, you can't now. Like, those gifts are illegal.
Well, it's.
I guess what I'm getting at here is, like, the way that campaign finances are raised now, it's not, it's dirty, but it's equally dirty across the board. Like, everybody can use the same dirty trick. So, like, it's it's overpowered and wrong, but it's overpowered and wrong for everybody. Like the more we try to regulate it, I just feel like the more, people are going to find those loopholes and they're going to work around it, and then it's going to stifle, it's going to stifle people from being able to get involved in the process.
No, actually, if you can fund your campaign by working people and from grassroots efforts, you can. Bernie Sanders showed it. You can build a political movement out of thin air. He had probably less than 100 people attend some of his first speeches, but he started gaining ground because people liked his message, people donated to him. So at the end of his campaign, he raised $150 million from working people. And
right, but the popularity of Bernie Sanders came from word of mouth and marketing, not from money that he raised. So the popularity of Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump in this past election cycles is outside of the effect of money and fundraising. The Jeb Bush had all the money in the world to run his campaign, and he couldn't get above like a 5% approval rating.
Well, if
nobody wanted him.
So on a national level, that could be the case because you can gain celebrity status through media and through the internet as we know it now. That's how Bernie Sanders gained a lot of his popularity, was through internet, and Trump gained it through traditional media, and also through the internet. I'm not going to lie, but he, on a local level, unlike Senate and House Representative level, what really matters is the grassroots efforts, getting out to your constituents, knocking on doors, getting flyers out, doing town halls, speaking to voters, organizing all those people, getting TV ads. That's how it's done on the representative and Senate level. So you need money to do those things, and these corporations know that, and they'll give money to those people. What the Justice Democrat is doing is you can donate to this party, and they will redistribute the money through the candidates that they want to support.
That's kind of, that kind of already happens though. Like if you donate to the Democrat or the Republican Party, they use that to. If
you donate to the Democratic Party, they are not going to run they're not going to primary their own corporate Democrats. They're not going to support a person who wants to rein in corporate tax havens. Is another article in the platform. They're not going to do that because that goes against the donors they have, the real money.
Well, I'm saying they use the donations that go to the parties to run the infrastructure of those parties for, polling, getting data, kind of what you were talking about, going out and knocking on doors. As far as selecting politicians that are going to run in whichever race is going on, that's, when you're talking about like national elections, like like your Congress elections, then okay, that's a little bit more higher level. But when you're talking about like really local elections, like your city council, your state senate, your mayors, your governors, those are definitely decided on a much more local level. And that's where the money really matters,
take a city like Chicago, for instance. Like you can't run for mayor of Chicago without some kind of money.
No, but Chicago's a big city. You compare Chicago to, say like Oshkosh, Wisconsin, or a much smaller city.
Well, you just wouldn't have to funnel as much money to those locations because you wouldn't need that much coverage.
Right, but what I'm saying is in those instances, those smaller elections is where the money has more impact.
And also smaller states, like take the Dakota Access Pipeline. Naomi, what was her name? The Democrat from Nebraska. The one Democratic senator from Nebraska said that the Dakota Access Pipeline will get built and the water protectors don't mean anything because she was paid by the corporations, who's paid by Energy Transfer Partners and these people like that, these oil companies that want this pipeline built. Even if she's a Democrat, she's against a pipeline being built through Native American land and over a water supply. So that in and of itself can tell you that when it comes to like these small Senate elections in these small states like in like North Dakota or South Dakota or Wyoming, then they can rig that system, especially when it comes to pipelines.
I mean, when it comes to anything, really, where when you're looking at a significant investment of capital. Well, I mean, when we're talking about, going back to Citizens United, the ruling of that basically says that you can have, super PACs, you can have these large organizations that aren't corporate, that are, super PACs are typically, built and funded by, large groups of people. But I mean, if you take that away, if you overturn Citizens United, you take away that power. And now all the big donations will be coming only from corporations because there's no other mechanism there to give the voice to the people. And I think it should be noted that the biggest voice for overturning Citizens United was Hillary Clinton, and the Citizens United case directly involved her. So she's not exactly the most.
She didn't get on board with that until Bernie Sanders said something about it.
She's been ranting. She was ranting and raving about that the entire election.
Yeah, because in the primaries, Bernie put her on blast, and she's like, "Oh, okay, my base doesn't like this. I should probably be against it." She's a lead. She's not a leader. She's just someone who looks at opinion polls and makes her decision based on it, like Obama does.
I'll concede that point.
I can see that point. Whenever it's blasting Hillary Clinton, that's like automatic yes. Anyway, I usually give this argument. I think I gave this argument in my Is Our Government Bought episode, but it boils down to a simple point. When our politicians are funded by the people, they will work for the people. If the politicians are funded by the corporations, they will work for the corporations. Now, there was and I might have referenced it too in the video, but there was a video by CGP Grey. It was called Keys to Power, or 3 Ways to Rule a Country, something like that. And it basically said the leaders of a country get power not from people, not from like heritage. They get money, they get power from their keys to power, which is their generals, and this is just dictatorships. Their generals, their executive leaders, their treasurers, and things of that sort. All of their high officials. And when you see a turnover and you see a revolution happen, then that means the keys to power didn't like the guy that they already had, so they went to a new guy. And that's a big reason why the new dictator is sometimes worse than the old dictator. But what it applies to in democracy is the keys to power are supposed to be the people. But when the people we have right now, the people are no longer the keys to power, because the corporations can influence the perception of the fact that we have keys to power. They just influence our mindset into aligning what they want by using ads, by dumping so much money into Senate races and House races, and throwing out like negative attack ads and things like that. So they can influence the American psyche in the way they want, and it is in a sense infringing on our sense of opinion, in a sense.
So let me bring this up, because when I'm looking at this on the website for the Justice Democrats, they talk a lot about money, and this kind of goes through a lot of their points, talking about corporate money and corporate backing and reining in corporate wealth. But what I'd be curious about is they're talking about removing a lot of this big money possibility from funding of political campaigns, and even they even say that all members of the Justice Party should reject billionaire and corporate donations when running for office. But would they support term limits at the representative level? Because for me, that is, when you're talking about limiting the ability of corporate greed, when you're talking about limiting the ability or limiting the possibility of a politician to become corrupt, you have to immediately talk about how much time are they spending in that position. It's a lot easier for a career politician who knows that he'll probably have his Senate seat for 20, 30 years to take a bribe or to fall prey to Washington lobbyists, as opposed to someone who knows that they're only going to be there for at most 4 to 6 years. But they don't mention that here. They don't mention anything about term limits. They just mention donations to limit funding.
Okay, so I think there's a twofold answer to this question. One is that there's a twofold answer, but let me give a personal reason why I don't entirely support term limits. Because I don't think term limits itself is the issue. You have people like Bernie Sanders who have been in Congress for 20 or 30 years and have constantly been fighting for the American people and has like a 70, 80, he has like an 80% approval rating in his state. Now, this leads into the first answer to the question is when these senators, a lot of them don't have good approval ratings. And usually in a democracy, if you don't have good approval ratings, you're voted out of office. Because the people don't like you, they don't like the things that you were doing in Congress, they don't like what you voted for. So they will want someone else. But what they're able to do is they're able to bash the candidate that they're running against and make them seem like a terrible person, make them seem like the only option, and a lot of it also comes from celebrity status, like especially like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. Marco Rubio won back his Senate seat from another corporate Democrat. When it went back, he was able to keep his incumbency.
Well, incumbents typically win races. I mean, and
because they already have that infrastructure from their donors to run these attack ads and to get their people on the ground.
And that's exactly why you need term limits. I mean, if we're going to talk about any type of campaign reform, term limits should be a part of it.
But here's the thing, though. They can, even though their approval ratings are like crap, they can still be in office.
Right, but that's why you implement the term limits. So
if you fix the fact that they can run attack ads and outspend their opponent, then you have a level playing field. If you have a level playing field, if there was a level playing field, then that guy would be voted out of office. Especially if his approval ratings were so bad.
Or you just limit the amount of time they can spend there. You try to like kind of go around the ring and try to create like a mechanism that would ultimately maybe remove the person. Or you could just say, hey, look, you can only run for the Senate this number of times for these terms. I mean, it's good enough for the president. It's good enough for the highest office in the land. I don't see why it hasn't been implemented, across the board for all federal positions, including Supreme Court justices, because they hold those for life.
Let me get to the second answer first. They actually touch on this in the second part of the last sentence of the first article of their platform. They gerrymander for partisan gain. So if a certain political party is in power during a census, they're able to restructure the districts so that a bulk of like Republican voters are all bulked up in one group, and then they can divide Democratic vote. And the same for Democratic legislators. They can if you look at some of the political districts that are implemented,
they don't make any sense.
They make no sense. They're like, there's a piece here, and there's like a stretch over here, and there's a big chunk. Where does it all fall into? That's because all of their party is concentrated in those places. A majority through the data they've gained and through cold calls, find out what their political affiliation is. They're able to see where their voters are. So they group those people together. And then they divide their political opponents' districts up so that they win those districts too.
Yeah, well, I'm not gonna sit here and defend gerrymandering. I mean, that's the thing that needs to be done away with. I mean, that's across the board.
So that's another way that they stay in office, even though they have a low approval rating. So that's factor number 2. Factor number 3, it could be as an argument to your is a direct argument toward term limits. What happens? And I referenced this in my episode. What happens at the state level in this when money comes into the state level is there's a race to the top, which means they will fast track a certain candidate because they the donors like their stance on their issues. So they'll fast track into the Senate, they'll fast track to the House, and then to the Senate, and then like to leading areas in the Senate, like majority leader or leader of a certain caucus, so they can have a lot more influence over other senators or other House representatives. So what would happen is we'd see a mass race to the top. It would be a crazy race to the top. You'd still have people in Congress in our government for 20 plus years.
Not if they have a specific term, not if they have limits to how long they can be there.
Okay, let's say you set an 8-year limit to the House, and you set an 8-year limit to the Senate, right? And you set maybe like a 4 or 8-year limit to the state legislature. That means they've still been in politics for 24 years.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about the state legislature, is different than the federal legislative branch. But I mean, if you say, okay, fine, you can only have 8 years in the Senate and the House, even if you don't have reciprocity between those two, and you say, okay, your 8 years here don't count against your 8 years over there, that's 16. That one person can be in politics for 16 years, but they're not going to hold that seat, that one specific seat, for 16 years. There's going to be, after they have those 8 years in the Senate, they're going to be out of there, and then they would have to turn around and run for a seat that most likely another Republican already holds, or they would have to find something else to do.
And then they'll just outspend, like
the easiest way around that is just to have offset term limits. Don't have equal term limits for both the Senate and the House. Have it where it's offset, so you have your elections are taking place in off years from each other.
That system just seems like it'd be complicated, but they'll work around it and they'll still figure out a way to rig the system, even if. So, like, say if you were in the House for 8 years, but like you couldn't run for the Senate for another like 4 years, like there was a gap between that. So what they do is they would give them a job as a lobbyist until they could run for the Senate.
They wouldn't be able to do that, though, because there's currently, thanks to President Trump, there's currently a 5-year ban now. So after you leave a position, you can't lobby for up to 5 years from leaving that position. So let's say in this hypothetical that someone did go and they served in the Senate, and then they left that position, they wouldn't be able to have a job lobbying for that interim to when they go to run for a different position. And I would even go so far as to say that if you serve in one branch of the legislature, that would preclude you from serving in the other side of the House.
Well, let's say not just lobbyists. Let's just say they got a job at that specific corporation of one of the big donors they have, and they just paid him $10 million to sit in an office for 5 years.
Okay.
And then they could or for 4 years, and then they could run for Senate again. They'll just pay him $10 million, $20 million a year, and just sit in an office.
Well, I would think that would be a very that would be a bad use of everyone's time and money. I mean, typically when someone leaves the Senate, or when someone leaves the presidency, they'll write a book, they'll get paid off of speaking fees. I mean, once you've been in a form of leadership, or once you've been a representative in this country, a lot of doors open to you regardless of how long you've been there. So I mean, the idea that we would try to punish people for making money based on their time in the legislature just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, here's the thing. The thing is, that's not the question. The question is, will they just sit in an office for 4 years and then run for the Senate? Because they've already bought that specific politician, and they can back that specific politician. They'll just say in the ads, "Oh, he served 8 years in the Senate. Now he's ready to get back into it and run for," or he was in the House and he's ready to run for the Senate. And they'll just run like rosy ads for him, and then they'll just bash his opponent.
But if there's if there's a clause, or if there's when you're putting forth the bill for term limits, the easiest way to ensure that that doesn't happen would be to say that once you serve in the Senate, you cannot serve in the House. Say it's a blanket term limits.
If they went from the House,
I'm saying blanket term limits for across all the legislative branch. So you can only serve X amount of time in the legislative branch total. Then you don't have then you completely obviate that situation. It wouldn't happen.
Well, no. I mean, so what if the corporation that bought them and paid for their political campaign? What if they told them at the beginning of their term, they said, okay, well, in your 8 years, when you're done here, we're going to pay you $10 million. And we're just going to keep you in our company for a year. That is also another form of bribery.
I mean, yeah.
That's another workaround that they can do. These people are a lot smarter than you and me, and they could find a way around that.
Well, hold on a second. I'm not going to say they're a lot smarter than me.
Well, collectively, there's a lot of people with a lot of, especially lobbyists, that know how to do this.
My point, though, is that, I mean, in the scenario that you lay out is, there's no reason why that wouldn't happen without term limits. There's no reason that, if a corporation were going to buy, a politician, there's no reason that under the system that we have now, where there are no term limits, where they would not just say, hey, okay, we're going to give you donations, vote our way, and when you're done, we'll give you a big lump sum at the end. I mean, there's nothing, there would be nothing other than the fact that that's illegal to do regardless, stopping them from doing. I mean, having those term limits would be to ensure that you have a constant, you have constantly new people running, that you don't just end up with the same person for like 70 years in one position, which I think is a good thing, and I'm surprised you're not for it.
Well, they could also set up an organization like an evil form of Justice Democrats, where they'll just have this army of nominees, and they'll just keep pumping them out. They'll keep pumping out these people that they've already paid. They'll get into office, they'll serve their time, and then they'll leave, and they'll get their severance package at the end. So there's a lot. There's just way too much room for. There's too much wiggle room in that scenario. If you take the money out,
having term limits.
Yeah, for term limits, there's too much wiggle room still for bribery and for corruption. But when you take the money out altogether, then you completely cripple that entire scenario. You can't put a certain amount above anything, and you can't form super PACs. It can only be run by the campaign with working people's money.
Yeah, okay, but what I'm saying there, though, is that if that were the case, then people would not be able to really afford to run. You get what I'm saying? You would every politician would have to have like a super amazing grassroots campaign, and unfortunately, most of your politicians just can't do that.
I think that's pretty much the idea behind Justice Democrats, is that these small people who have great ideas, they can't run, so people who donate to Justice Democrats agree with the platform and want to see the candidates that they put forward agree with that platform and implement that platform. So this in itself, I love the idea of Justice Democrats, because it gives you an avenue, and to me it looks like the future of campaign finance reform, where not only is it helping people who couldn't get into politics before get into politics, but it also gives them training, and it gives them a network that they can work from. And it's exactly the reason why they didn't just split off and join other parties. Is because if they take over the Democratic Party, then they get the entire infrastructure of the Democratic Party to use. So, and if people don't like the platform, they don't have to donate. So this itself is a shining light beacon of how you can run political campaigns without donor money. You can consolidate working people's money in individual campaign donations and you can funnel it out to these people who agree with the platform and are committed to the platform.
I mean, assuming they're able to raise enough through donation. And I guess the other thing that kind of scares me about running an entire an entire party based off that principle is you run a very real risk of getting nothing but ever increasing populist rhetoric, and it's very easy for that to go such an extreme that it becomes very dangerous.
I've never talked to someone who shares like my political ideology, and then I've told them, do you think capitalism has not elevated our standard of living? And usually they'll say yes, of course it has. So in my mind, there should be a hybrid system where for some areas of the government, like healthcare and in my mind also military weapons production, those sources should be government operated, but everything else can do what you want. Even space is now being outsourced to corporations. It used to be just NASA. Now it's SpaceX and all these other companies.
Well, it's because the private sector is very good at doing things.
Yes, but when it comes to healthcare, like we've talked extensively about this, they've gutted the American people. And if you went to universal healthcare, you could pay half of what you pay a health insurance company, even under Obamacare.
Well, that's up for debate. We'll get to that. That comes.
We'll definitely
that's coming down a little. That's coming down a little bit later, and that's very debatable. But I want to get back with the ideas about the election reform and the campaign reform that they have.
Yeah. Okay. Well, your point was that it becomes a dangerous thing. The populism message becomes a dangerous thing. I think that it's just righting wrongs that have been done to the American people. When that happens, we get to a post-World War II era where a lot of people consider that to be America's golden age. Especially a lot of people, like a lot of older people in their 80s and 90s who lived in that generation, think that was the best era in America between 1945 and 1965. That was the best era in America.
Well, there was a lot of technological progress. There were basically jobs for everyone because we had a lot of manufacturing in this country. And there was a lot.
That's because FDR sponsored a lot of. He sponsored an entire infrastructure project. He sponsored Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. The New Deal built the golden age.
Well, not really. We had a lot going for us. I mean, remember after World War II, we were the only country with manufacturing infrastructure, so basically the entire world had to buy American because everything else was destroyed.
FDR took over the economy because, of course, we were in a do or die situation. It had to happen. He took over the economy, so he revved up the economy so much, and he let the free market decide what to do after that. He built the infrastructure for what America is built on today through what he did during World War II with the New Deal, with sponsoring unions. So that itself shows that it's not a taking over of manufacturing, not a communist rhetoric. It is righting wrongs that have been done and helping the American people themselves and building our individual wealth, because we've produced so much, and the production levels do not equal how much we actually get paid, the median income.
So I think, what we might differ a little bit on the mechanism in order to get it done. Obviously I'm for term limits. You're for, something a little bit more, something maybe a little bit more in depth. Maybe that has a little bit more finesse. I think the thing that we can both agree on, though, is that we both want to see, the third and fourth parties, these smaller parties, be able to kind of come in, have more of a say, and break the duopoly that the Republican and the Democrat Party have right now.
Well, it's not just that. It could be even people in your own primary. Say you could have 3 different primary opponents in a Senate race. You wouldn't have to just pick that one guy who has celebrity status. You can pick the guy you agree with and not have to worry about the big guy winning anyway.
Yeah, which unfortunately the way that our elections work doesn't really leave for a lot for that possibility, because you vote for who you vote for, and then that's your vote. It's done, and that's why I really like the one thing that I really like in here is the idea of ranked choice voting, where you can say, okay, this is my number 1 pick, But then if they don't get in, this is my number 2 pick and then my number 3 pick. So you really have the opportunity to say, this is the person I really want in, and your vote for that person will still count. But then if they don't, if they don't have the votes, then your vote isn't, quote unquote wasted, because your number 2 pick, your vote isn't counted for your number 2 pick and for your number 3 pick. And then whoever out of those 3 hits the majority first, will win the election.
Yeah. This is implemented in a small manner in caucuses. In caucuses, you can start out with whoever you want. You literally physically have to be there. It takes like hours to do. So you have to physically be there. You stand on one side of the room for your party, and the other for your candidate, and the other person stands on that side, and the other people stand on that side. And then they count them up, and you have to hit a specific number. Whoever has less than whoever's last whatever candidate is last has to divide their votes to the other candidates. So the people in those have to decide what their second choice is, and it has to get up to a certain, I think it's a certain percentage of people, and they literally have to count heads, do the math. I've seen the math done on paper. I'm like, that is not efficient at all. We have computers that can think 1,000 times faster than humans can, and that should be done on a computer with a top-down list of 1, 2, 3, however many candidates there are. What do you prefer?
Yeah, and I think there's, here's the thing: if ancient Romans could implement this system, where they literally had they had their voting blocks literally in blocks out in the middle of the field. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to implement a more elegant version of that system, given our higher level of technology. So I will say that is the one thing I really, really like. I definitely agree with it. And I mean, regardless of where the idea came from or who's putting forth the idea, it's a better way that everyone can have their voice heard. And so that way people will vote third party without feeling like they've thrown their vote away.
Yeah, but also it kind of answers your term list questions a little bit, meaning that incumbents will be challenged because they don't feel like the people who vote for the incumbents think, oh, my vote's going to be wasted if I vote for this guy because he's 20 points ahead of him. No, they can vote for the guy they want to vote for, and they'll put the incumbent second. So everybody will vote for the person they want to vote for. And in that sense, that'll also elevate the opinion of the people and actually bring the opinion polls and the approval ratings into our actual political decisions.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, it takes the voice back. It gives, your voters more voice, which is ultimately, I think, what everyone involved in democracy or involved in our republic should be trying to do. I mean, I think this past presidential election and the past, this entire past election cycle was really defined by who the people thought heard their concerns the most. And I think, too, having this ranked choice system will also get more people out to vote, because people who would typically say, oh, well, my vote doesn't matter, somebody else will do it. Well, no, now you have a chance to really make it known who you want in office, get out there, have your voice heard, and maybe, we can get up from 30% of the voting age population getting out there and dropping ballots, and hopefully we can get up to 50 or 60%. Because I think it's a travesty that in this country that we don't have more people voting.
Yeah. I mean, and probably Hillary Clinton probably would have won the presidency, because if the ranked voting system was in place, a lot of people who voted for Jill Stein would have voted for second option for Hillary Clinton. Maybe not, but I could my educated guess, that's how it would be, because a lot of people, especially me in a blue state, I didn't want to go out and vote, but I probably would have voted for Jill Stein if I had registered in Illinois soon enough.
Or even in the case of something like where someone could say, okay, well, Bernie Sanders is going to be my number one vote for the general election. I mean, he wasn't eligible, but let's say that he had put himself out there and he was like, I'll just run independent for the general election. People could have said, okay, well, I don't really like Hillary Clinton, so I'll put Bernie first. If he doesn't win, Hillary second. And that's going to change up the way the votes are counted too.
And let me just add a little quick point. not running as a third party was probably the smartest thing Bernie Sanders ever did.
Not running as a third party?
Yes. And sucking it up and supporting Hillary Clinton. Because what would happen is they would not blame Hillary Clinton for her loss. Right now it's all on Hillary Clinton. Even if they want to like throw around Russia or everyone hacked, it was everything. It was James Comey. No, it was Hillary Clinton. But if Bernie Sanders was run, Sanders did it. Sanders like took all of the millennials away from Hillary Clinton. She lost because of that. It's all Bernie Sanders' fault. It would have been a Ralph Nader thing, like an Al Gore Ralph Nader thing.
Right, yeah, and they did that same thing with Ross Perot in the 90s. And they tried to do it with Jill Stein. They tried to run it out there like, oh, she got votes, but then everyone realized that she didn't get enough of a percentage of the votes for it to actually matter.
Yeah, her votes didn't matter. I mean, probably a couple of districts, maybe, but not enough to swing the entire election. But
no, not enough to make that much of an impact.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is it looks like this is going to be a multi-part series discussing Justice Democrats. I mean, this is a new organization in a political party forming right before our eyes. So it pretty much deserves as much attention as we can give it.
And it's got some pretty, it's got some pretty big backers, a pretty decent pedigree going behind it. So I'm interested to see how this thing turns out. Truth be told, we do have 2 years before the next, we have 2 years for the midterms. So it'll be interesting to see how it grows and if it's able to gain traction on the next series of the national elections.
And we'll see if it actually gets representatives from state, local, and Senate level actually voted into office. And if that happens, then it is a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, because I mean, the first step with forming a political party is to get traction at the local level. You have to have that traction at the local level. You have to have that installed base, or else you're never going to win a bigger national election. That was it was good talk. For everyone listening, let us know what you thought. Hit us up on Facebook at Balance Point Radio. Hit us up on Twitter at balance_point.
On YouTube.
Email us. Yep. Hit us up on YouTube, Balance Point Radio on YouTube. Email us at balancepointradio@gmail.com. Leave messages on our SoundCloud. Send us a carrier pigeon if you have access to one. But we will be running down the rest of the policy points for the Justice Democrats. We'll be giving you our thoughts. And here's the thing is, even if you don't care about the Justice Democrats, even if you're like, oh, whatever, this isn't going to go anywhere, it's just a bunch of fringe, wackos, every single one of their policy points are things that are major points right now in the political discourse of this country. So
yeah, people are going to read this and they're going to be like, these are things I care about.
Yeah, these are important things. So, whether you're for the Justice Democrats or against them, whether you're Republican, whether you're, old school traditional Democrat, whether you bleed red or blue, these are things that are going to have to be addressed at some level. So we might as well go ahead and get the discourse going about it.
And also, on a side note, they do have a really cool logo.
They do?
Right next to the Justice Democrat in the white.
Oh, yeah, no, it is really cool, actually. It looks like a superhero logo.
It does.
I wonder if they did that on purpose.
They probably did. Anyway, guys, you'll have a good one now, and we will see you next time with our next episode of the Justice Democrats.